Welcome to Los Revolucionarios, a program devoted to the work of Latinx artists, changing the face of opera on stage and off stage. I'm composer Hector Arbienta, and artistic director of Opera Cultura, and I'm absolutely thrilled that today I'll be interviewing a wonderful composer and librettist, Carla Lucero. Welcome, Carla.
Thank you, Hector.
Great to see you. Great to see you. And Carla and I have known each other for quite a while. She's just a phenomenal artist, and she's been working in the field of opera as well as in symphonic work, dance work. But today we're focusing on her work as an opera composer. So Carla, why don't you share with us how did you first get introduced to opera, and what excites you about opera?
Well, the first thing was that both of my parents love opera. They always have. And so one of my earliest memories was as a toddler listening to The Marriage of Figaro. And you remember how they would come in, operas would come in those big sets, those albums, those box sets and the pictures. So I loved it. I would sit down and listen. And I think what really excited me about opera was that I realized very early on, at the back of my head, that stories told through music or with music was it was so much more compelling and exciting. And even though I didn't see an opera until I was much older, I could imagine everything in my mind,
Mm.
because it was so, I guess, like almost cinematic. I mean, that would be the only way that I could, the only thing I could compare it to. So yeah, it was a storytelling through music that excited me.
And so you said your sort of first experience to opera was Marriage of Figaro. So
Yes.
Mozart. So what are some of your other influences as a composer? Someone
Uh,
listening to your work, might they hear some, sort of references to another composer, or sort of just inspired by everything you've listened to? I'm seeing.
that is such a hard question because it's so hard to like analyze your own music. But I'll tell you the major influences on me have been Puccini because of the fluid, and lush vocal lines. Love that. Berg, which who is like a polar opposite, but Berg really because of the dramatic tension that he was able to infuse, using dissonance and really kind of stretching that vocal line to make it almost more speech like. I don't really go that far unless I'm trying to make a statement, but I love that. Stravinsky, the exciting rhythmic passages he has, and also kind of a violence, of the rhythm, and Granados, because of the flair and romanticism of the Spanish dances that really influenced his work. So they're four completely polar opposites,
Oh,
but I,
yeah.
I think I do draw upon those composers sometimes. Yeah.
Okay. So it's not so in terms of style then, what would you sort of, if someone was going to describe your music, what would
Uh, so
was when
it's it's interesting because my my music has been described by others as romantic, but with um, a neoclassical influence,
mm,
and that it's chromatic.
okay.
So I don't know what I would call that, but that's the way others have described it.
Okay.
Right now, I'm working on an opera about Helen Keller. It's called Touch, and it is the most challenging opera I've ever written. And my co-librettist is Mariana Mott Newworth, and we I had I had Helen Keller in the back of my head for a long time, even as a child. And as I got older, I read a lot about her life, and she was a political activist, and she was one of the founding members of the ACLU. She was one of the founding members of the American Socialist Party. She was really badass, compared to what you would think somebody in that time would be. And then you add to that she was blind and deaf is amazing. And she was also a civil rights activist. So, even though she couldn't see the color of our skin, she believed in equality completely through and through. So, and then there was another side that was interesting, and she had the star-crossed love affair with her interpreter. It's really she had an interesting life. So that's what I'm working on now. I just got back from New York after actually a second production of Juana.
Juana Inés de la Cruz, renunciáis a vuestra vida de pecado y rebelión. Renunciáis al estilo de los libros. Juana, vuestro ruego, en Dios. Renunciáis a todas vuestras mundanas asociaciones. Renunciáis a la búsqueda.
And then Touch is my fourth, and we just workshopped it at the Seagull Festival in the Adirondacks. So that was something pretty amazing, to take part in. But yeah, so right now I'm finished with the piano vocal score. We're doing another workshop in Birmingham. It's actually a semi-staged reading at the Human Rights Works Festival at the end of this month. And I'm also, now begun the process of orchestration.
Full orchestration, chamber,
Chamber.
as a chamber. Okay. So how would you, for those of that maybe are not, composers, how would you describe the process, do you think, between composing for a full orchestra and chamber?
Well, it's crazy because I just premiered with LA Opera a very large work that was grand opera. And it's hard to say because the core is always right with orchestration, that you're choosing instruments to state, motifs, and maybe some for support. Just with a major orchestra, that's easier to do, to make these strings, become very lush, and to have these dramatic moments where you could really play with the density of the orchestra, right, and create something very sparse by contrast. It's trickier, I think, with the chamber orchestra, because it's leaner. You have to make some hard choices sometimes.
My own work with Zorro, Zorro's written for 25-piece ensemble, but I had to
Wow.
make, yeah, but I had to make choices, about, brass. But, in my process of writing, and I'm curious about this part, that's why I asked you the question, is when I worked on the piano vocal score, I already knew what the orchestration was going to be. So as I'm writing
Yeah.
the orchestration, I'm thinking about parts, like which instruments could, have this specific thing, or do you sort of follow along that same process, or is it a little bit
Yeah,
different?
definitely. I hear it in my head first, in terms of the orchestration, and really the orchestration is really color, and drama, and you can really kind of pull out, um, really emphasize certain thematic material or moments in the opera with orchestration. Um, so it was really, I had to know, going into it, what it was going to be. Although the French horn, Keith Wolf, if you're listening, I still want that. So that's kind of
You
like,
heard
I'm
it
like,
here.
yeah. uh,
I'm rooting for
so
Carla.
Bad chart. Yeah. So yeah, it's the same thing, Hector. It's already know what I want to hear orchestrally, and then I always leave a little room if I get the full string section, which sometimes happens. That I'm prepared for that I can expand that, you know um proportionately.
Yeah, yeah, balance, yeah. Let's go into another question, and it might be very interesting in terms of your answer. Um, Sort of in the last few years, I would say there's been a real momentum in the field of opera to give, other voices an opportunity,
Mhm.
women, communities of color, and so on. And as a Latinx artist, and And I know that I know your folks, of course. Your father's from Colorado, your mom is from India, but still you're Latina, of course. And so I'm wondering how these different cultural influences have impacted you as an artist, your journey, your opportunities, sort of the projects that you take on now. Um, you want to share a little bit of that with us?
Sure. So actually my dad is New Mexican. I
Oh,
they,
my apologies. Oh, I'm
uh,
gonna hear
one
about that.
one state over. So
Okay.
New
Where,
Mexican,
where,
and
in
you,
where in New Mexico?
well, Albuquerque, Puerto de Luna, and then Albuquerque, and you know, for since Hector, like the late 1500s,
Oh, yeah.
early 1600s. So we're an old New Mexican family on my
I'm gonna
dad's.
look it up when I go. I'm going to New Mexico on the first. I'm gonna go back to the records. I'll look at the name.
Lucero. Yeah, we're that's there are a lot of us there. And I remember like visiting. Do you remember my grandparents at all?
Yes, of course. Yes.
Okay. They they had moved from, they went to Colorado for work, and then they started off as migrant workers too, and ranchers, and then later on my grandfather became a factory worker. So this whole thing kind of circled back to them coming to California, and that's how we ended up there. And then towards the end of their lives, they wanted to go back to New Mexico because that's where they started out. So it's really, I think so. My grandparents really influenced me in a huge ways. For one thing, all of my work comes from a place of social justice, all of it. So whether that is in terms of representing people of color, in my case it's been always Latinx people, or the queer community, which I'm also a part of, or at this time, with Helen Keller, somebody who was profoundly disabled but made a huge mark on society and did so much good in the world. So I'm attracted to stories where people are outsiders, or outlaws, right? And but somehow changes it, and it's always woman centric. So
Mhm.
I hope that somehow that it translates that what they've done in their lives changed the perception of women in some way, or changed the world in some way, or their environment. So change makers who are women, and two of the Latinx stories really sing to me. Is that cliche? They you know
Oh, it's very, very valid.
they
Very valid.
they really sing to me because I mean, to be blunt, I experienced a lot of prejudice, as I know all of us have, because of the way I look and my last name. And I've always identified more as Latinx than East Indian, um, because that that culture was for me much warmer, and I actually fit in. I look more Latina than East Indian. So that was kind of an easy comfort level for me to be able to move within that society. And I was going to also say one thing, Hector. When we were at Cal Arts together, you and I gravitated to each other, and there were very few of us there. You
That's right.
know,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. We were there in what, in 2000? Is that right, Carla?
yeah. That's a fever dream. It's hot here, but not that hot.
Yeah. I dare anybody to find how old I am online.
I,
Okay. No,
yeah,
I'm serious.
I
I'm very,
still dye my hair, so
no, I'm a very happy 60-year-old, so I take pride in it.
you look
Uh,
great.
Thank you. Uh, so yeah, it's great. This is, it's great that you bring that up because, yeah, I think, I remember the same thing when I was at the Conservatory of Music in San Francisco. There was a friend who was a Latina, back, we called each other back then, Latinos, Latinas. And we gravitated towards each other because we were like, we were it, and I think that definitely drives sort of our work because we feel that, when you look at the landscape, the opera landscape, I'm going to say, in terms of what works are produced, commissioned, and so on, we are really, well, I'm going to say you're really, the work that you're doing has opened up opportunities for other composers of color, for women, and and so I think it's one of the things that drives us. And so I really applaud the work that you do, Carla. I'm just absolutely thrilled to see, all these opera companies coming to support your work and commissioning you. It's absolutely marvelous. And I think if anybody, when now it's going to premiere in Touch is going to premiere where?
In Birmingham with Opera Birmingham, and we are in the works of making it a rolling premiere. So bringing it to the West Coast, the East Coast, and I think that's it so far. So
Well, that's pretty good.
we're excited, really.
When is the world premiere going to be then?
January 2024.
January 2024. Okay. Well, we need to all put that in our calendar and make a little have a little road trip. Carla, I want to thank you so much for taking the time, to share your story and to share the work that you're doing in the community in the field of opera. And we all look forward to seeing the premiere of Touch and your other work. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, Hector.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. And I'll be seeing you soon. All right. Bye-bye.